All right, number one thing. What would you say the number one thing for success or failure in making it through an Ironman would be?
Don't miss the long stuff. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Coaches on Gouches.
Being slouches.
I'm not slouching so much.
I'm always slouching.
So today, guys and gals, we're going to talk about what it takes. There's a lot of excitement around possibly having an Ironman in Memphis.
Mm-hmm. And rightfully so.
Absolutely.
It'd be huge for the city, for sure.
So they're talking about making the decision June 10th. So we're going to talk today about what it takes to actually finish. We're talking about finish. Mm-hmm. What it takes to finish an Ironman triathlon. Yeah.
The main goal here is like give people an idea of what's going to go in, what that process looks like, how much time it should take, how you should be, kind of how many workouts you should be doing each week.
Yep.
It should be good. Because there's probably going to be quite a few people that are like trying to come off a couch into an Ironman.
If we get it, there's going to be some people that are hit that sign up button. Mm-hmm. So I'm Coach Dale Sanford.
And I am Coach Bryant Funston. We are the co-founders of BPC Performance Coaching, where we specialize in helping time-crunched athletes optimize their busy schedules so they can maximize their athletic performance. Every BPC coach is trained in our 5 pillars coaching system that has been developed over the last decade through our work with athletes of all ages and ability levels, from fresh off the couch to world championship competitors. You can find out more about BPC by going to buildpeakcompete.com, checking Facebook and YouTube at buildpeakcompete, and don't forget about that Instagram at BPC Performance.
Booyah.
One word.
Yeah, one word. All right, so we're going to get to all this iron information, but first, shout-outs.
Got to do the shout-outs.
Yep, we don't have quite the list we had last week. But
last week was probably going to be one of the longest of the year.
Yep. So first shout-out, Stacy Chick goes to the Mountain to Beach Marathon, gets another BQ. And
I believe a PR, right?
I think so. Yeah,
3:31-ish.
Yep.
I think was
solid
the time.
Solid day.
Solid.
Heather Nichols at the Renaissance Crits in Tupelo was first on Saturday and third on Sunday in the women's 4-5 field.
Top step of the podium. And also at the Renaissance Crit, Adam Ferroni, second and third Saturday and Sunday respectively in the Cat 4 ranks.
Yep. And then Anya DeBellick, she did the Coeur d'Alene half marathon.
Oh, nice.
Beautiful area.
Yeah, Coeur d'Alene.
You got anything?
Also a spot for an Ironman, right?
Yep.
Ironman Coeur d'Alene.
Yep.
Those are mine. I got a good luck I want to shoot out there to our folks that are doing the Dirty Kansas 200.
DK.
And Hart Robinson's like, hey, I love single speed so much, or I hate shifting so much, that I'm just going to go single speed for 200 miles on the gravel road. So those guys are ready, so I'm excited to see how it goes. It's a long day, and it's one of those things that, like, anytime you're doing something that long, same with Ironman, you almost have to expect there to be, the highs, the lows throughout the race. Bad things, can and generally will happen, and it's kind of how you deal with that and going into it with the right mindset. So
you're going into the unknown.
Exactly. Yeah, and it's part of the reason why you do it, right?
Absolutely.
Cool. Well, let's kind of dive into this. Dale, why don't you, for those who have no clue, everyone's probably heard of what an Ironman is, but people probably don't really know what the details are of that. So kind of break down what an Ironman is, first off.
An Ironman triathlon is just a specific distance of triathlon. It's a 2.4 mile swim, a 112 mile bike, and then a marathon, 26.2 miles running. Do them in succession. There are a couple races. There's one, Chattanooga, for instance, is the course started out at a 114 mile bike, and it's just stayed that way. But they kind of offset it because they have a downriver swim. So it's
net time is semi-similar.
Yeah. Yeah. So very long day. We're talking the fastest of the fast go under 8 hours. And then, you have a 17-hour cutoff.
Which is nuts, because there's some people that going sub 7 just on the bike leg can be a challenge.
Yeah.
So those that are doing the whole thing in sub 7.
Yeah, it brings out a big, wide variety of people and fitness levels.
Yeah.
So
yeah, that's crazy.
So a big day. So, in preparing for that, like the preparation, obviously for a experienced athlete and a new athlete, completely different. Mm-hmm. So for new people who get into who maybe aren't even in triathlon, this is easily a 10 to 12 month process.
Yeah.
You've got to start somewhere, and if you're coming from not doing much, then you need to give yourself as much time as possible.
I think that's where a lot of people go wrong, is they say, hey, I want to do this, and pick one that's 6 months away.
Yeah.
And it's very tough because it is a super long day. Cutoff's what, 18?
17 hours.
17 hours. So, I mean, a lot of these people, if you're planning on 17 hours of constant forward movement,
yep.
I mean, that's a big stress on the body that you have to prep the body for.
Yep. So if you've been in the sport a while, maybe you've done a half before, half iron, experienced triathletes can prepare in 6 to 8 months. That's typical, Obviously give yourself as long as you can, but that's just typical.
Yep.
For duration of training.
Excellent. So kind of let's sort of dive into, so that's sort of like the very general on how much time you should sort of pick an event out, but let's sort of dive into what would a week look like for an athlete who was going to be doing this.
Yeah, ideally you'll progress yourself into 3 bikes, 3 swims, 3 runs. That can be an average of 11 to 15 hours a week. Mm-hmm. And then, on a minimum basis, I would say you're doing 2 swims, 2 to 3 bikes, 2 to 3 runs. Obviously, the bike is the one that, even though we may be biased because we're very bike-centered, but the bike is the longest part of the race, and mm-hmm. your bike fitness determines your ability to run. Mm-hmm. So we don't really let people get off without doing the 3 bikes a week. That's a priority. And
that's one of those where, especially if you're more of a beginner and aren't really used to handling the training stress as much as someone else, that's, spending time on the bike, you can push volume out a little faster on that than you could on the run.
Yeah.
So spending that extra day on the bike is still going to benefit you aerobically for the other events, but it's not going to beat your body up nearly as much as you'd have, trying to do 3 or 4 runs.
Yeah. I mean, especially if you're new to it, mm-hmm. you've got to do the long stuff, but you're also trying to balance what your body can handle. Your body's hasn't been prepared to handle large workloads. Putting yourself through three big runs a week, mm-hmm. for some people is just not gonna work out. You'll end up with something. That's why it's kind of why there's a big percentage of people that don't end up going and doing these races, is because they push themselves into this too quickly and end up hurting themselves. So it has to be progressed. It's not like you're going to jump straight into doing 11 to 15 hours of training. I mean, the progression, if you're brand new to this, the progression just into that volume can easily take 6 months.
Yeah.
So it's a long process. Give mm-hmm. yourself time.
Yeah. The longer out you pick, the more patient you can be and the less risk of injury comes. And that's really kind of the big thing, right?
And
balancing stress and recovery so you improve and don't get hurt.
And the longer you have to work on things, maybe your limiters, your big limiters, mm-hmm. Technique, those type of things that are going to help you a ton once you have no choice but to start building volume. To make sure that you're garnering all the fatigue resistance you can for this one big day.
So if we're looking at an average of 11 to 15, what would you say is like the absolute least, or maybe the absolute least you've seen from an athlete? Any ballpark there? Someone said, no, I can't do 15, but I could do 10.
I mean, I've seen people do it on 10 to 13 average, but they still got in like the bigger weeks. So in that bigger week, so let's talk highest volume total usually is around 15 to 20 hours, and that's still a big range. I think on my first Ironman, I don't think I cracked 16 hours in a week.
Yeah.
But I still managed to get in on specific weeks, still managed to get in that 100-mile bike
6 hour
and like
ride
a 18-mile run and stuff like that. So those were just split up, not done in the same week. So it kind of brought weekly volume down, but they were still put in there. And and that happens a lot with new people is you can get the longest run in, just not on the same week as the longest bike, which is not usually the best plan anyways.
Yeah, just kind of like a side note here. This is not, we had Seth in here, who's a pro triathlete, who's doing 30-hour weeks.
Yeah.
We're talking about people who are more of a time-crunched athlete.
Yeah, you got real responsibilities.
Exactly.
Family, job, whatever.
Yeah. So as we're running through this, keep that in mind.
Yeah. So highest volume, 15 to 20 hours. I've personally never done a 20-hour training week for an Ironman. I think the largest I ever got was 18 maybe. So a lot of our athletes rarely crack 18 hours just because things happen.
Yep.
We might be shooting for that, when in long-term planning, but you don't have to do an 18-hour week to finish an Ironman.
Yep.
And those longest days can be split between several weeks. So you're never having to do like a massive week. So,
and a lot of this is you're prepping the body clearly, but also, mentally just gaining that confidence, knowing that you can put in a 100-mile ride, or a 6-hour day on the bike, or you can get through an 18-mile run. So there's, that psychological aspect in the endurance sports in general. I mean, so much is mental.
Yep.
And I would say, I mean, I won't say anybody could do an Ironman. It takes a lot of dedication for sure, and you got to do the training. But mentally, if you're in it mentally and you keep that constant forward momentum going on race day, I mean, if your mind's in it, people can accomplish great things. It's a big challenge, but for those on the fence saying, "Oh, I could never do it," I would encourage you to get your mind right, and with a good plan, you can do it.
Yeah, if you can manage if you can manage to get in the long stuff, with the proper progression, if you can manage to get in the long stuff, you'll be fine.
Yeah, for sure.
Longest run usually for most people is 16 to 20 miles.
Yep.
2 to 3 hour type time frame there. Longest bike usually 100 to 120 miles, 5 to 7 hours on the bike for your longest days. And now, if you're experienced, or you're, even if you're not experienced in ultra distance, if you're experienced, then you might end up doing multiple 100-mile rides, or something like that, and multiple 2 to 3 hour runs, and that's just solidifying that big base of fatigue resistance. But for most new people who are just doing a consistent progression from start to finish, that progression is going to happen little by little, week after week, and then when you get to those big volume weeks, you're already pretty prepared to pull those off.
Yeah.
So it's not like, I think people get intimidated by the fact that I'm doing this, but I'm never going to actually do that day in training.
Yeah.
And they're like, so how am I going to pull this off?
Yeah.
Well, the truth is, what we do is we simulate accumulated fatigue of that one day over several weeks. So when we get into when we get into the mega volume, kind of what we referred to it, when we get into mega volume, you're going to be doing your longest bike, your longest run, and probably your longest swim in like maybe a 3-week block. And so over that 3 weeks, you're going to get rest, but you're still going to accumulate a lot of fatigue.
Yep.
So by the end of that third week, the run that you experience at the end of that third week is going to feel a heck of a lot like you're going to feel on race day when you get done with that 112-mile bike ride.
Exactly.
So the biggest thing we say is trust your training. And so if you work and go toward accumulated fatigue and not just worry about, I got to get in a 112-mile ride. I got to get in a 4,000-yard swim. I got to get in a marathon run. You don't have to do any of that stuff prior to a full Ironman. You don't have to run a marathon before a full Ironman. You don't have to even do a half Ironman before a full Ironman. And sometimes doing that stuff within your build inhibits your training or sets you back because you have to take such large recovery after those things.
That's what I was going to touch on. You mentioned distance and you also mentioned time ranges, right?
Yep.
So if you take someone who's not as fast of a runner, we've coached some super fast runners and we've coached some runners who aren't as fast. And, someone who's running, say, 13-minute miles, sending them out and saying, hey, you need to knock out 20 miles, that's going to be a big day on the feet. So touch a little bit on, time, and we don't want to get too far off the track here, but time versus the mileage.
Yeah, for anybody who's pretty new to long course, we always have them trained by time. Your body knows how long you've been out there. It doesn't know how many miles you've been. And, 20 miles for one person can easily be an hour different than 20 miles for another person. And, but the fatigue factor.
Yeah, the fatigue you're accumulating during that training session
is pretty similar. 3 hours for 3 hours. So, your body knows time. It doesn't really know distance. So, more experienced athletes, we can work on specific distance because they've been there. They've done that. And we kind of already know how long it's going to take them anyways. So, but if you're new to it, highly recommend just going on time.
And probably not pushing much more than 3 hours on that run.
No.
Especially if you're doing all the other training in conjunction with it.
Yeah, no, that
will set you back big time.
I don't think I've ever given anybody over 3 hours on the run for their first Ironman ever. Unless I knew that they would freak out if they didn't get a little bit closer to 20 miles.
Yeah, and that's where it's kind of that blend, right, of the of the psychology and the confidence that the athlete needs to know they can do it versus the actual training stress that you're putting on the athlete.
And it's the same thing with the swimming. Swimming is most people's big worry. And so
because of sharks, right?
Yeah, because of sharks and jellyfish and other sea creatures, sea anemones,
seahorses. They look all.
But I'm not a huge fan of just sending somebody and just telling them they have to do a 4,000-yard straight swim. But for a lot of people, that's when they complete that 4,000 straight swim, it takes all the anxiety out of race day for them because they know they can finish 4,000 yards. And that is the one of the three that's doing, you can do the 4,000 any given day, really. And it's not going to necessarily set you back just because swimming's so low impact. But so we use, every once in a while, I'll give somebody a 4,000 straight if they're new to it, just for them to say, yeah, done. I'm through that, not worrying about the swim.
Excellent. Now, what about as far as throwing brick workouts together? For those not familiar with what a brick is, a brick's where you essentially combine two of the disciplines together. Most traditionally, bike run.
Yeah. So most people consider bricks as bike run. They're I would love to give more people swim bike bricks. It's just very hard to pull off. But in iron distance training, honestly, I'm not a huge fan of bricks. They come at a pretty high cost, and I like to refer to them as just long transition runs. So you are running off the bike, but it's all, it's pretty much, there's not a lot of work involved. It's just pretty much marathon pace off the bike. And I don't ever do it off the longest bike. That's a big day for somebody right there.
Yep.
But again, I mean, if it comes down to the athlete's mental state, they just feel better about knowing they can do long run off a long bike. Mm-hmm. I'll set it up for them. But the longest brick I ever give anybody is like 80 miles and 60 miles. Now the 80 miles will have work in it.
80 miles and 60 or 6?
Sorry, 6. Sorry, yeah, my bad.
It's like, Dale, going all in.
Yeah. 80 miles with some work on the bike.
Yeah.
And then 6 miles off the bike. And that 6 miles is meant to lock in marathon pace off the bike in an Ironman.
Essentially goal pace.
Yeah, not to go faster, not to slog it out, but just to lock that pace in, know what it feels like, and even work on your nutrition and hydration post kind of long bike.
Okay, cool. All right, so kind of talk about this as far as tips to help a person either structure their program or what to do around those high volume weeks. Are there any strategies that you use? Yeah, you can't like of all the things in a Ironman program, you can't miss the long stuff. Yeah.
You can't fake fatigue resistance, or you're going to be crawling across the finish line, or maybe not even make it. Your body has to be prepared. So, the biggest thing really is planning ahead. You have to plan ahead. And so whenever we do a program, we go to race day and we work backwards, and we post those biggest weeks where they're going to be way in advance, and then even do some of the progressions for the longest bike, longest run, longest, everything. And so the athlete, even though everything else is not necessarily laid out for them from start to finish, those are already in there. Mm-hmm. So they know this time of the year, these are the weeks that I need to be prepared to do these massive volume weekends or whatever. And that way you can plan ahead with your family.
Exactly. I was going to mention that. Yeah.
The family is the huge part for a lot of people. This is a commitment to doing these types of races. So you really have to get your family on board on the front end.
Oh, for sure.
Or it could be your last.
Yep.
I mean, it is daunting. So,
yeah, it's a sacrifice for you, but it's also a sacrifice for your family.
Yeah. Well, I mean, sacrifice maybe here and there. Yes, you have to give and take. But integrating your family as much into the process as possible is key. Now, there are some families where both husband and wife will do some racing. It makes it a little easier to talk through and kind of plan ahead on those things. But sometimes people will take time off work. I was
going to ask as far as planning vacations. So
take a Friday off about work, so you can kind of get in some of the longer stuff on Friday. Or
do you recommend just playing sick from work?
Yeah, absolutely.
Just calling a sick day and then
take a sick day instead of a vacation day. You need the vacation day for after the Ironman.
And then post all about it on your social media accounts so your boss knows.
Yeah, I recommend a social media blackout on any day you take as a sick day.
We'll call them mental health days.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. Talk with family. Plan ahead is the biggest one by far. Knowing when those big days are coming. Just on those days, you have to make sure that you get up early, get that workout in, and be prepared to go to bed on time. Because when you hit mega volume, you're going to want to sleep a lot, and you're going to want to eat everything in your house. So making sure your nutrition is on point, hydration is on point, and then get good food in the house, prepared for post workout.
Yeah, really focus on your recovery.
That goes back to that planning ahead. I mean, if you know when they're coming, you know how to prepare for it. That's the easiest way to make sure that these biggest weeks happen.
Yep.
So,
what about as far as camps? There's quite a few camps out there. We're actually going to be putting a camp on.
Yeah. Yeah. So a camp, like a training camp, setting up your own training camp can even be a good way to do it. Like we talked about, take that sick day.
Obviously.
And then go.
I'm getting ill. Started on Wednesday.
Yeah. Yeah. Not feeling so hot.
Not feeling good.
Take that sick day and then, find a place to, post up for the weekend. Sometimes it's easier to get this stuff in when you're not in your normal zone, like having to come back and do family stuff immediately. And, like having the honey-do lists and all that stuff, you just talk it out with the fam first. Mm-hmm. Say, I'm going to do this, if there might be a training camp, like Bryant said, we're working, actually, this is kind of the first that'll be out there, but we're working on a long course specific training camp for the late season long course races. So Chattanooga, Louisville, Florida. So a lot of the late season, I guess 70.3. So we're gonna gear it towards 70.3 in iron distance racing. So it's gonna be early September. So that's something that you can do to make sure that you there's some fun involved in that training.
Other people.
Yeah. social aspect is there. Mm-hmm. And then, it's also good to have like the SAG support in case something happens, and that can get you back rolling so that a stupid thing like a flat tire doesn't ruin your entire big training weekend. Mm-hmm. Or like you forgetting your nutrition doesn't blow out a whole, long ride day. So camps are a great way to make sure that you get in those massive training weeks. And they're really they're all over the country. Really, I mean, people are putting on long course camps all over the place.
Yep. Timing wise for that, we've sort of patterned our camp that we're planning on doing. We've sort of put that.
Yeah, it's like somewhere between 3 and 8 weeks.
Yeah. So for those thinking about where that kind of huge volume should come in, it sort of depends on how much progression of volume you have to try to squeeze in.
Yeah.
But if you've got plenty of time, you're kind of looking in that.
Yeah, and our camp's going to be scaled. So like the people who are in mega volume can do the mega volume. The people who are maybe don't need quite as much or aren't going or on a 70.3 maybe program can do a bit shorter day. Yeah. Everybody doesn't have to do a century and a 3-hour run. It's going to be scaled with different routes and stuff like that. So, but again, camp is a great way to do it, and they're fun.
And during those, you're just so focused on, all you have to focus on is getting your training in and getting your recovery in.
Right.
You don't have to focus on
anything
else. It's kind of like your time, make it happen, no excuses, and it's really easy to mentally get in a good mindset and knock out a huge training week.
Yeah.
All right, so kind of moving forward here, cost. What could someone expect to have to fork over to the fine folks at Ironman?
Yeah, well, I will say Ironman events are the biggest production event you'll ever go to.
Yep.
They are fantastic in that respect. I have never been to another event where there's higher energy for as long as there is. Mm-hmm. I mean, they just put on such a fantastic event, and the logistics are great. They always do really well with the courses, keeping the courses clean and well stocked, and obviously they're dealing with hundreds and thousands of volunteers for the day, and they manage to put all these people together to help the racers out. And there's always whatever city they're in, they get the city involved, and there's always a ton of people out on course. I'm getting goosebumps just thinking about it. But it really is an amazing experience, and that's kind of where they shine. So in doing that,
it's not just a race; it's a total experience.
There are some incredible costs to closing down a city. Entry fees for an Ironman, full Ironman, range from $700-800. If you get in earlier, they have them tiered now. So if you get in earlier, they're a little bit cheaper. If you wait too long, they're a little bit more expensive. Mm-hmm. So that's that's the upfront big expense. They actually do it now where you can do a payment plan on them and stuff like that. And you can always pay a little bit extra and get a deferral program. So if for some reason you can't do it, then you can defer to another year or event or something like that. Then you just have to consider, obviously, if it's not in your town, lodging, travel to and from. There's always coaching. You got to have a coach, right?
Got to. Shameless plug.
Shameless plug. And then, equipment-wise, sometimes people put equipment into this category, but, your equipment is kind of your investment in your sport, in your, making this your lifestyle, making this your activity for better health. So, I don't necessarily throw the equipment in this category because it's just... It lasts longer than one race, and you're,
exactly, yeah.
People blow money on equipment whether they race or not. So
for sure, it's fun.
So normally I would say, like, I think the ones that I've done, I think I've been somewhere in the $2,500 all in, but I've never flown to one.
Gotcha.
I've always driven, and then that way I didn't have to necessarily ship the bike or fly with the bike and stuff like that. So you can go, you could obviously, if it's in your town, it's an entry fee.
Yeah, so when it's here in Memphis.
Yeah, when it comes to Memphis.
When it comes to Memphis,
everybody jump on it because it'll be the cheapest Ironman you ever do. But usually it's somewhere in the $2,500 all in. Like you can double that pretty easily if you're obviously going to a harder place to get to. I mean, they're all over the world. So if you're going international, obviously it's going to get more expensive.
Exactly.
But North American Ironman, $2,500 to $3,500 probably all in.
Sweet. So last thing here, tips to the average Joe, average Jane on like how to make this a great experience, from kind of start to finish.
Yeah. The last thing that we want and the last thing that Ironman wants is, we talked to the regional director, Keats McGonigal. Shout out, Keats. That's the last thing they want is people to get into triathlon, do an Ironman, and then disappear. We refer to the Ironman hangover all the time on the show.
Yep.
That's the last thing we want. So we want, to have it, the first experience especially, to be really good experience.
Oh, for sure. Yeah.
So again, one of the main things you have to do is integrate your family, not only into your training, but into the trip itself, into the day, and help them, by bringing them into the logistics part of it. So they're not like left to fend for themselves while you're out on course for whatever, 9 to 17 hours. If you're going to a city you've never been to, pick out things for your kids to do and pick out the restaurants that you want to see and things you can do while,
that all goes down to that planning ahead thing.
Absolutely. You have to plan ahead. And if you don't, by getting your logistics done way ahead of time, you would not believe the anxiety it takes off of the actual training.
Yeah.
Because you've got a place to stay, you have your flights booked, you get an idea of where you are going to eat while you're there, just having all that planned for you.
Yeah.
I mean,
your itinerary set, you know what to do, you know where to be.
Absolutely.
Stress is off for sure.
So bring your family into it. Get your lodging and your travel set like the day after you hit that, that submit button on the registration. But making sure that your family is I can't say this enough. Like making sure that your family is understanding of what you're doing on the front end, and you have to let them know why you want to do it. Yeah. Like they have to be in on your why. If they're not, then they won't understand it, and then.
Those weeks where you're gone for honest, 6 hours on a Saturday, knocking out your bike, they're going to be wondering.
To be perfectly honest, I've had athletes who I've coached through an Ironman who 4 or 5 weeks out, they just say, look, after this race, I'm done. Family's not into it, like too much time away and stuff like that. And I get it, like totally get it. That's a big reason why I personally haven't done a long course race in several years. It's just work and family and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. It just, it doesn't mesh right now, could change if Ironman Memphis happens. But
which one are we mad dogging?
I don't know.
We're mad dogging cameras here.
But yeah, I mean, you have to have the family on board. Other huge one is you cannot train solo all the time. Can't do it.
We talk about specificity, right? And how doing group rides all the time isn't the best training towards, doing well in a triathlon. However, continue.
Yeah. I mean, but if you never train with other people, it just gets so lonely. Like the training gets so lonely and so monotonous.
Your risk of burnout is going to go way up.
Through the roof.
Yeah.
And part of the best part of being in triathlon and in endurance community and being a part of like the Ironman family is like the other people involved. Like that's like a great part of it. And so if you just keep to yourself all the time, you never ride or run with anybody and you never work out with anybody, you'll get to that race and you'll still feel really lonely out on course. Like you're gonna feel all alone.
Like you're on an island,
And and then it never. I mean, these are obviously you're covering a lot of ground on these courses. There's always going to be spots on every course where there's nobody. Like you're gonna be alone for a while. So like, you got to kind of keep the social aspect in there whenever possible. Join a team, get some buddies coming with you. That's second big thing is don't go alone. Like have a friend to train with that's doing the same event. Join a team, whatever. Mm-hmm. That's huge. The social part of makes an experience like this just elevates it a lot more. Another thing is just making sure that you dial in your nutrition and your hydration way before the event. I can't stress that enough. I've had people totally fit for an iron distance race and just had a terrible race. And when you start digging through things, didn't drink enough, didn't eat enough. And, they were as fit as they've ever been. But it doesn't matter because you're going so long that you have to continue to bring in calories and fluid and electrolytes. You'll never make it. You'll probably bonk within. We always say, the key to success in these long distance events is how you pace yourself, listening to your body, and fueling. Like if you can keep those two things on point throughout, you're going to have a very strong chance of success. If you go out way too hard or if you get behind in your nutrition, it's going to be a bad, long day. That was kind of my next point was pacing. I mean, you've got to pace yourself. I mean, obviously, like most of the time in an iron distance race, the swim's pretty easy to pace. But if you're like me or like yourself, and the bike's kind of your strong suit, it's really easy to overshoot the first half of the bike and pay for it later. So you really have to work on your pacing and patience in these races. Play the long game. Playing the long game and knowing that when you get off that bike, you still have 26.2 miles to go. And then for some people, it's the run. They come out of T2 like they're racing a 5K. Because they pace the bike well, but then they blow themselves to bits, in the first part of the run. And so be patient and manage. Just manage your day. The last bit is, obviously another shameless plug is get a coach, man, because they're there to answer all of the questions that you're going to have. You're going to have questions. If this is your first iron distance race, find a coach and they will answer all of your questions. Save your time on, Googling and getting answers from people who may or may not know what they're talking about. Sit down for 30 minutes or an hour with a coach who knows what they're talking about, hopefully has maybe been there before, and then they can answer all of those questions in an hour, whereas you'd spend 10, 12, 15 or more hours Googling, reading 100 different responses.
Yep. And that way as well, when you do have that week that you get sick, that's 5 weeks out.
Yeah.
You don't have to go crazy. You can talk with your coach about how to restructure your plan and work around it. There's going to be stuff that happens, things that come up, and having a coach that's able to kind of help you and manipulate your program as best as possible with your situation is super valuable.
That's really there's some decent one-off programs, cookie cutter programs out there, training plans out there. There's some decent ones, and a lot of them do work for new first-time athletes. But what happens is life. Yep. And when life creeps in, and especially when you get toward those mega volume weeks, and something happens, you just can't get in certain things, you're on your own to make that work. And unfortunately, a lot of new triathletes make poor decisions there, and they either try to just stuff everything into the weekend, or move things around too close together, and they end up hurting themselves. So by having a coach, that person can move those things around for you and intelligently rework not only that week, but if it needs to be done, the next several weeks, so that you're going to get the quality and the duration of exercise that you need to finish this race and not have to crawl across the finish line. The big thing, really what we're trying to do here is we don't want to waste our finish line photo.
I was going to say,
that is
if you're going to be crawling across the finish line, at least make it super dramatic.
Yeah.
Army crawl it. All right, number one thing. What would you say the number one thing for success or failure in making it through an Ironman would be?
Don't miss the long stuff. If you're wanting to do an event that's going to take you somewhere between 9 and 17 hours, you will not physically do that much time in one single day. So if you miss the long stuff, you're missing that buildup of accumulated fatigue over several weeks that's going to simulate that one day. So don't miss the long stuff.
Excellent. All right, crew. Hopefully that gives you some great tips on kind of how training looks like, what costs associated with an Ironman are, how to integrate family into this whole thing to make sure you have the most successful day you can. I think that's
and
all
if
we got.
hopefully we've brought it into light to where you do think it's possible. We try to convince it. We tell everybody, if you can put out the time, if we look at it and you have the available training time to do it, then you can do it. The problem is people get into it, don't really have or aren't willing to give that available training time, and then
that's kind of where that whole thing when I was saying sacrifice. I mean, you are going to have to sacrifice something, maybe a different hobby you like, or maybe it might be some sleep, or it may be, some stuff.
Your Game of Thrones addiction.
Yeah. And there may be stuff that you're going to have to sacrifice in order to spare an extra 8 hours of training time in a week. So, but if you're prepared to do that, you can get to that finish line.
Anybody can do one.
Yep, for sure. Cool. Well, if you got questions, post them up. Otherwise,
appreciate you guys hanging out, watching, listening, and we will catch you guys next week.
Ironman Memphis. Bring it.
Adios.
Peace.